Listen up, weed lovers. It's 420 month, and IndieCloud.co is here to elevate your celebration. Get a massive 42% off all weed, edibles, and vapes for the entire month of April in our biggest sale of the year. This is a special year to celebrate 420, as it marks 6 years since the sale of almost all cannabis products was legalized across the country. This allows IndieCloud to deliver to you dispensary-grade legal products discreetly delivered straight to your door. No medical card needed. IndieCloud has something for everyone. Whether you're a seasoned toker or just starting out, you can explore the world of weed safely with our award-winning Soda Shop Gummy Series, our 12 strains of flower, or our record-breaking selection of vapes. Celebrate 420 responsibly all April with IndieCloud. Discreet delivery, top-shelf products, all month long. Head over to indiecloud.co/spring24, that's C-O, not .com, to snag 42% off your first order.
Is the Bible based on ancient aliens? Were humans created as a slave race? Follow me down the rabbit hole about the Anunnaki. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the rabbit hole. I'm your host, Danny, and today we are talking about the Anunnaki, or sometimes people say Anunnaki. I think it could go either way. I might go back and forth this episode. Who knows? And before we get into this, I want to give a big disclaimer. I'm not trying to discredit any religion that you may believe in. This is a conspiracy theory podcast. I'm reporting the conspiracy theories. Am I making connections, especially in this episode, between ancient aliens and the Bible, or what's based on what? Absolutely, I am. That what you believe is what you believe. I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm just giving you the information about the Anunnaki, about what is believed about them. Whether you believe it or not, that's not up to me. That's up to you. You believe what you believe. I'm not trying to be sued. I'm just here to report conspiracy theories. So the first encounter that we believe that when the Anunnaki came is 450,000 years ago. And they came to Earth in search of gold. Why did they need gold? I'm glad you asked. The Anunnaki had destroyed the atmosphere on their planet. So they came from planet X, or the 12th planet. It's called Nibiru. And Nibiru orbits our sun every 3,600 years-ish, give or take 100 or so. And they needed gold to patch their atmosphere. We don't really know why it was damaged or how it was damaged. We just know that the gold was helping fix their atmosphere. So, and even today, we use gold in our spaceships as insulators, which is interesting because why did we decide to do that? And could it date all the way back to when the Anunnaki came to Earth? We just knew, because spaceships and outer space, gold works fine in outer space. Unknown. So it's believed that when Nibiru approaches the Earth, crazy things start to happen on our planet. So to include devastating earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, massive tsunamis, which we all know that the moon can create. So when the moon comes closer or whatever, crazy things happen on Earth, right? So if another planet comes close to our planet, their gravitational pull is going to create weird things. Earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, things like that. That happens. So, it makes sense. Honestly, it's all making sense. But they say that the gravitational pull of Nibiru could cause a pole shift on Earth. So this would cause a rapid and catastrophic displacement of the Earth's crust. There is some speculation. Again, I'm going to say speculation or assumptions or whatever because I'm not trying to discredit any religion that's out there, but that maybe when Nibiru approaches, that's the rapture that is talked about in the Bible, that there's basically hell on Earth is being created because of the gravitational pull from another planet. If you want to approach this in a purely scientific approach, alien type approach, again, don't sue me for religions. Believe what you want to believe. This is going to be a very religious heavy content because a lot of these things are connected to the Bible in and other religions, other ancient religions, ancient cultures, different things. So just so you know what you're getting yourself into. The Anunnaki built an outpost in southern Africa hundreds of years before the Sumerians were an established civilization, before Mesopotamia, before all of that. So before like we have like human civilizations. And at this time, the Anunnaki were mining the gold themselves because they came here and they're like, we need gold. So they started doing it. They were doing all the work. Then they realized that mining gold just like isn't very fun and they didn't want to do it. I mean, they're aliens and they have all this technology. Why can't they figure out something else? So the Anunnaki that were tasked with the mining went to their leaders, Enlil and Enki, and told them that they were basically done. They're like, we're not going to do this mining anymore. We don't want to. And they asked the leaders about creating like some sort of robot or being to do the mining for them because they just like straight up didn't want to do it. Which, okay, cool. And that's when they took the Neanderthal man that was already on Earth and they put about 80% of their own DNA into this man, or human, right? It could be a woman. I'm not trying to gender these people. Anyway, so they put some of their DNA into this person or the people of Earth already. And it created basically like what we know to be human beings today, which kind of makes sense with the history that we know of man. Is like they weren't very smart. They weren't like creating things. They weren't like, they were just like out like barely functioning. And then all of a sudden they became really smart. You're like, where did you guys learn? Like, did you just evolve and become smarter? Or is it because something else interfered? Like, did the Anunnaki really put 80% of their own DNA into us humans to make us who we are today? And we became the slaves that they needed for mining. We know that they were here so many years before the Sumerians wrote about them because of the mines that were found in Africa and our mitochondrial evidence. Mitochondrial DNA is only passed down through women, and we can trace the evidence of the DNA that looks like us back 300,000 years. So we know that human beings, the way we know human beings to be today, were evolved or created 300,000 years ago. And then based on the mines and everything, that's where we're getting that 450,000 year-ish timeline for the Anunnaki to have come to Earth. And remember that they're only in orbit every 3,600 years. However, I never did find any information as how long they would stay here before they had to leave again for their orbit. But you're thinking, I mean, it's probably a while. Anyway, so the first time we see the Anunnaki mentioned is in ancient Sumerian texts. The Sumerians lived just 6,000 years ago, so I mean, there's quite the gap of information that we really don't have. But of course, I will give you some history on the Sumerians because a lot of the information that we get is from them. So I want you guys to know who they are. If you don't know, you just have a little bit of background for the rest of the episode. They were the people of southern Mesopotamia who lived between 4,100 and 1,750 BCE. Mesopotamia was a region of West Africa, like Eastern Mediterranean, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which is now like Iraq, parts of Iran, Syria, Kuwait, and Turkey. So in that area, the Middle East area over there. And it was named Mesopotamia, literally meaning between rivers in Greek. So that's why they named it that. The Sumerians were responsible for creating so many things in their civilization that have really carried on to today, which, again, we could eventually, and I will link this like all together eventually, you could say that maybe the Anunnaki gave the Sumerians all the information that they had, because before this, we didn't have schools, we didn't have jobs, city-states, writing, math, religion, the Farmer's Almanac, even women's rights. So women had the same rights as men throughout the Sumerian civilization. And when they were invaded, women's rights kind of fell away. But like the oldest civilization that we know of had women's rights, and then all of a sudden, like, we just got our rights back less than 100 years ago. Anyway, this isn't about women's rights. That was just something that I thought was really cool. They've been credited with so many things, even like their city states. So these city states were divided based on religions. So like if you were for an example, if you were Jewish, you all lived in this city state. If you were Christian, you all lived in this city state, which was such like it's such a, I don't know, it seems like modern thing to do, even though they're the oldest civilization. Why didn't we take a writing out of their book? But that doesn't matter. That's just what the Sumerians were doing back then. Cool. We do see mostly evidence of the Anunnaki from the Sumerian culture and a little bit of the Babylonian cultures as well, which lived in the same time period. They were like further north in Mesopotamia.
Listen up, weed lovers. It's 420 month, and IndieCloud.co is here to elevate your celebration. Get a massive 42% off all weed, edibles, and vapes for the entire month of April in our biggest sale of the year. This is a special year to celebrate 420, as it marks 6 years since the sale of almost all cannabis products was legalized across the country. This allows IndieCloud to deliver to you dispensary-grade legal products discreetly delivered straight to your door. No medical card needed. IndieCloud has something for everyone. Whether you're a seasoned toker or just starting out, you can explore the world of weed safely with our award-winning Soda Shop Gummy Series, our 12 strains of flower, or our record-breaking selection of vapes. Celebrate 420 responsibly all April with IndieCloud. Discreet delivery, top-shelf products, all month long. Head over to indiecloud.co/spring24, that's CO, not .com, to snag 42% off your first order. Summer is the season of hot temperatures, outdoor adventures, and refreshing water activities. Summer is also the season of rough on your feet, causing dry, cracked heels and toes. Introducing Babyfoot, the original exfoliation foot peel that contains 16 natural extracts formulated to remove dead skin cells in 3 easy steps. Apply the booties, relax for an hour, then wash your feet. In 14 days, you've got baby smooth skin and your feet have never been softer. Letting dead skin cells build up over time is hazardous to your foot health. Our professional-grade DIY products, like our original exfoliation foot peel, our men's foot peel, or our moisturizing mask, are some of the best foot care products on the market, created with your foot health in mind. Pamper yourself with a spa day from the comfort and convenience of your own home with Babyfoot. If you want a chemical-free, easy-to-use exfoliating process from the company that created the original foot peel, it's time to treat yourself to Babyfoot. Go to babyfoot.com and use the code SUMMERFEET24 and get 20% off your first order with Babyfoot. That's babyfoot.com and use the code SUMMERFEET24.
We see a bit, like we get some more information of the Anunnaki in the Hindu culture, but most of our information comes from the Sumerians. 6,000 years ago is when we get most of our information. So, I don't know. I mean, they've obviously come back at least once since then. If they've come back, who knows? That's a question that I have. Have they come back? But there's a couple people that are kind of famous for writing about and sharing about the Anunnaki. So you have Zecharia Sitchin. He's probably the most famous guy when it comes to reading about, writing about, educating people about the Anunnaki. Anytime you do any research behind this topic, Zecharia Sitchin is going to be mentioned a lot. He was the first person to bring up the Anunnaki and their role in history and has been under fire about it ever since. So you can imagine just how pissed off people are going to get about this topic, because if it is true, it's basically saying that our religions are false or that they're based on aliens, which nobody wants to believe that. They want to believe in their God. They want to believe in what they believe in. So they don't want to be like, oh yeah, my God's fake and it's actually all based on aliens. Which sounds like really crazy, but here we are. Sitchin was the author of about 16 books which explain the Anunnaki and where they came from. He was born July 11th, 1920, and died October 9th, 2010. And he was mostly rejected because people deemed his work as pseudoscience, pseudohistory, but he taught himself Sumerian cuneiform and visited archaeological sites all over like what would have been Mesopotamia to learn more about this culture, the Sumerians. Like, everything that he knew, like he actually like did the research and did. Right now we have 400 people in the world that can read Sumerian cuneiform. Like not very many people. It's not like a wide, it's hard. I mean, I've seen pictures of it. I'm like, I don't know. It just looks like random markings to me. But this guy taught himself and then went and the people that discredit him the most are people that don't actually know how to read Sumerian cuneiform, and they're like, "Oh, he's wrong. He just made all that up." But again, when you have a belief in something, it's easier for something else to be made up than it is to switch your belief. So maybe that's it. I don't know. His books have sold millions of copies and have been translated into more than 25 languages. So it could be that human curiosity gets the better of us, so we want to read them, or that people believed him. Either way, dude made his money selling books and doing his thing. You also have Eric von Daniken. I think I'm saying that right. I think he was German, so I love German names. I'm always messing them up. He was born April 14th, 1935, and he also wrote books on the Anunnaki. He was also criticized for pseudo-history, pseudoscience, kind of the same thing that Sitchin's going through. But between the two, Sitchin was like, he mostly did like the interpretation of the actual like written word that the Sumerians were writing, and von Denken mostly looked at like the pictures and tried to decipher what the pictures meant by looking at that. So you have two different sides of this, and again, they're both kind of up to your own interpretation, depending, I guess. I'm sure they talked different back in Sumer, excuse me. So you're kind of up to interpretation of what the words actually mean when all put together, because the translation might not be 100%, but you're looking at a picture, and I mean, they say pictures say 1,000 words. Well, when you're looking at something, you can interpret it one way when somebody else can interpret it a whole nother way. If you've ever been in like an art museum and you're looking at a picture and you're like, I feel like it's happy. And then somebody else comes around like, that's a really sad picture. And you're like, what? Like, how did you see that? It's really hard to interpret what they're trying to portray through a picture. So you got these two guys. That's where we get most of our information. Again, from the Sumerians, translated through Sitchin mostly, and then Eric von Daniken. And then other people have also done their research and some interesting interpretations. And all that comes together as to what we know of the Anunnaki now. But the Sumerians were thought to have lived among the Anunnaki. So they were said, like, the Anunnaki were said to have been able to morph into human form, which actually, like, reminded me a lot of the lizard people, where they could morph into human form. And then it made me wonder, are the Anunnaki and the lizard people connected? Are the Anunnaki still living among us? I have a lot of questions here. This conspiracy theory actually gave me more questions than answers, I feel like, in the end. But anyway, that's where my brain went when I heard that. And these guys were huge. Like, these beings, I don't know, like aliens, they were giant. Compared to us, they were literally like, they looked like giants. They were so much bigger than us, which if you look at like Greek mythology and you think about like Mount Olympus and they have that statue of Zeus, he's huge compared to us mere humans. They're so much bigger because they're so much bigger. So again, could that be because the Anunnaki were giants compared to us? When you look at the pictures that were depicted in Sumerian time, they have pictures of these giants next to pictures of humans. So you have a human and an Anunnaki in the same picture. One's huge and one's just regular size. And they had more knowledge than like we would have had in the time, basically. Like, we didn't have nearly the knowledge that the Anunnaki would have brought for us, which might explain, like, knowledge is about sciences and arts and everything, right? This could explain why this is the first place we see math show up. And it's not just like simple math. The Sumerians are attributed with discovering complex math, like very complex math. It's not like simple things that we're like, oh, 1 + 1 = 2. That makes sense. No, this is like far-fetched stuff, like hard math. Stuff that we don't want to learn now because we're like, oh, that's boring and stupid. Why do we need math? The Sumerians were doing it 6,000 years ago. But there's a lot of connections with the Bible, like I said. So the word Anunnaki actually means from heaven to earth they came. Many similarities, and if not like the same stories, can be found in Babylonian texts and the Judeo-Christian Bible. So you're having the exact, maybe not the exact same story, but like stories that are so close, they're the same. There's like some minor differences. And there are pictures that depict the beings coming down from the sky with wings. Could this be where the idea of angels come from? Maybe. But the Sumerians and the Babylonians aren't the only people to depict beings with wings coming from the sky. This is like depicted everywhere, right? Any ancient culture, lots of cultures, lots of religions, lots of different places depict beings coming from the sky with wings. In Central America, you have flying serpents. You have the star people of the Anasazi. Are they all the Anunnaki, or did multiple different alien cultures come to Earth, land in different places around the world, introduce things that the local people would use and grow with, and then like leave, and maybe the Anunnaki are the only ones that came back? That could explain why some of the cultures were further behind than other cultures, because you see like the Sumerians and like in Mesopotamia, they're growing and they're creating a culture that we kind of base our life on today. And then later on, like in history, you see that like explorers from Spain, let's say, are leaving Spain. They're going to Central America. Excuse me, I almost said Africa. That's not what I meant. I meant Central America. And they're introducing our culture to them, like the Mayans and the Aztecs and all these people. And they're so much further behind it, like culturally, we would say. But is it just because they had different aliens introduce things to them, like they weren't as evolved? Again, like I said, I have more questions in this conspiracy than I have answers for you. I'm just like kind of talking out loud so you guys kind of have my train of thought while I was doing this research. And you have the story of the Nephilim. So the Nephilim is a story in Genesis about the gods of sons mating with the daughters of men. And you have the same story like about demigods, right? In like Greek cultures, you have the same type of theme, like these hybrids or these demigods in Hinduism, Roman, like Egyptians, Mayans, like the list goes on. We see these similar stories time and time again, just with different gods or different religions, right? So the Nephilim were reportedly giants, as were the Anunnaki, right? But the idea here is that the Anunnaki were the ones that created the slave race, and the Nephilim were the offspring of the Anunnaki and humans. So they would be the hybrids, the Nephilim would be, in this idea. The connections honestly go on and on. For the rest of this episode, I'm going to make connections between the Anunnaki and the Bible or different religions, just because like it's amazing how similar it is, right? So you have this king's list, and it's a list of 145 kings on a Sumerian tablet. And the kings on this tablet, they lived for an extraordinary amount of time. For example, one of the kings ruled for 3,600 years, which like, is it just a coincidence that Nibiru comes into rotation every 3,600 years, or like just like a happy accident? I don't really know. But you have the same thing in the Bible, where Noah lived to be 800, 900 years old, and so did one of the kings on this list. I didn't write down the kings' names, mostly because I didn't think I could spell them, and I didn't think I could repeat them once I did spell them. So you just have to believe me that these kings, and the queen, later we're going to talk about a queen here in just a minute, and I didn't write down her name either because like I don't think I could say it. The thought is that these kings that lived this long were directly seeded by the Anunnaki, which gave them the ability to live that long. And you have to think, if one rotation for Nibiru is 3,600 years, right, on Earth, that's only one Anunnaki year, right? Like if we're thinking about our rotation around the sun as Earth, 1 year is one rotation around the sun. Well, if their 1 year is one rotation around the sun, similar, like we're comparing rotations, but that's 3,600 years for us. They're going to live a lot longer because 1 year old is 3,600 years for us. But I also thought like could it be similar to the lifespan of like a bug versus like a human lifespan? So you have flies that live for like 15 to 25 days where we live like 80-ish years. Could it just be because they're so much bigger than us, they're so much more advanced than us that they live much longer, whereas like bugs are so less, I don't want to say intelligent. They're intelligent bugs, but like their intelligence compared to human intelligence is nothing, right? And they're so much smaller than us that their lifespan's just that much shorter. So that could be the same thing. It could go either way. But those are my thoughts about like if these kings were put into place because the Anunnaki were like, "Yep, you're the king now. Here's a little bit more Anunnaki DNA or whatever." They were purposely put there. Then they're going to live longer because the Anunnaki gave them like a little bit more of their DNA or whatever. But you have this ancient queen. She was discovered in 1927. A British archaeologist discovered the remains of the Sumerian queen in what was the city of Ur. So what was strange about this queen was that she had an abnormally large skull, like ridiculously large, similar to the skulls that have been found in ancient civilizations of Egypt and Peru. So we're seeing kind of these similarly large skulls in all these ancient civilizations, and they think that the queen was actually more closely related to the Anunnaki than like normal human beings would have been, which makes a lot of sense because the king's list had kings living for thousands of years, and it is said that kings and queens would spend time with the Anunnaki. And throughout history, it's been said that royalty of any kind is closer to God or has a direct link to God that the typical everyday person does not, right? So you have, for an example, like the monarchy in England, right? Why do they try to keep it in the blood? It's because like they have a connection to God or they're closer to God. They speak directly to God or whatever, right? And I'm not saying just them in particular. I'm just saying throughout history we see this theme. Could it be that it started way back in the Sumerian time where all these kings and queens, all these rulers were either hybrids or they had that direct connection with the Anunnaki, whereas like other humans wouldn't have had that connection. And that's why you would want like their children to become the king or the queen. You would want it to keep it in the bloodline because they're closer to the original creator. Does that make sense? But it also lends to the fact that the Anunnaki were not just in Sumer, but all around the world because you find these large skulls in Egypt and in Peru. And when you look at the pictures from the time of the Sumerians, they depict the Anunnaki having giant heads, basically like cone heads. Isn't it funny how there's like a movie about people with cone heads that are aliens from another planet? I'm just like putting weird connections together. But yeah, if you look at all the pictures of that the Sumerians depicted of this time and of these giants or of these winged creatures coming down, sometimes they had like bird heads, but sometimes they had human heads. But every time they had giant heads, or like it looked like maybe even like a hat on almost, but was it a hat or was it just like their head was shaped like that? And that makes sense as to why you're seeing these giant skulls in Egypt, in Peru, in Sumer, like all over the world. In the depictions, we're also seeing these human head, bird head people coming down with their wings, and they're wearing what looks like wristwatches. In a lot of their depictions, they're wearing something on their wrist, and it looks like a watch to us. In today's culture, it would be a watch. It could be something else, who knows? But it's very interesting that they were wearing these things. The question that comes up a lot, I think, is why we don't know more about these beings. Why there's not more depictions, why where's all the information? Where did all the information go? So there was a great flood. Yep, I'm going to do it. There's a great flood which might explain all of this. There is evidence in southern Iraq of a flood that occurred in 2900 BC. So this flood, which is something that is mentioned in the Bible as well, may be the reason we don't have much information about the Anunnaki. The Sumerians have a story older than Noah's story where a man built an ark and saved part of his family. The man was a king. He was one of the kings. Again, I didn't write down his name because I struggle with this. So, according to the Sumerian account, the flood was created by the god Enlil, which I mentioned him at the beginning. And he had basically grown tired of the noises of humans, and also procreation was getting out of control. And the more people you have, the harder it is to control them. So if you can keep the population under control, then you can keep the population under control. Enki, who was Enlil's half-brother, took the side of the humans, which we see this in other religions, other stories, right? Where one of the brothers is like, no, they're stupid, let's kill them all. And the other brother's like, no, like, we should save them and love them. So Enki was like, nope, like, we're going to be good. Everything's going to be fine. The humans are fine. We should leave them how they are. So he was the one that warned the king to build the ark because he warned him that there was going to be a flood, basically. And in Samaria and Sumer, they are used to floods because they lived between the Tigris and the Euphrates River. They flooded often. They were for a long time, trying to figure out how to keep the flooding under control. Floods would often, just wash away cities. But this flood was, bigger than any of the floods that they had encountered before. It is possible that this king built an ark, or it's thought that maybe the king built a spaceship and went into orbit. But because a lot of this happened in Iraq, when the U.S. invaded Iraq in 2003, when they first got there, a lot of the locals raided different places in the capital. One of those places being the museum that kept all these artifacts. And a lot of those artifacts are now, we say that they're lost, but it's because people took them. So all these people that raided all these different, and they didn't just raid museums, they raided everything. They took a lot of this ancient information that we would have more of. Although, there's plenty of people alive that still have the information about the artifacts that were in the museum. We don't actually have them anymore. But the fact of the matter is there was a huge flood, which, there's a huge flood in a lot of religions and this isn't just a Bible thing and a Sumerian thing. Everywhere you look, people mention floods in history books, in not just floods, but a giant flood, a great flood that flooded the earth, basically, right? And in both the Bible and in the Sumerian account of what happened, this wasn't a flood that just happened naturally. This flood came from the god, right? Or a god. So in the Bible, it's to wash away the sins of man, right? So the god in the Bible flooded the earth to get rid of the sins, and Noah saved all the animals, right? We all know the story. But in this case, again, to get rid of the people, we're just tired of the people. The god created the flood to get rid of the people. So the thing is, the Sumerian account of this story is older than the Bible. Is the Bible account based on the Sumerian's account? Unknown. Is it just a happy accident? I don't know. But a lot of people, especially when you're believing in the Bible, you're believing in what is being taught there. You look at the evidence, you're like, look, there was a flood because there's actually evidence of a great flood that happened. This is factual, actually happened. Whether you believe it was the Anunnaki or you believe in the Bible and that it was God, whatever. That's on you. So here are some of the questions that I came up with. Basically, like, are the Anunnaki still among us? Did some of them stay here? And that they're just like, is that what the lizard people are? Are they like working behind the scenes now? I don't really know. If not, like, if they didn't stay here, are they going to return to Earth? Or like, did they just give up on us and leave us to our own devices? Because that's a possibility as well. Or are the Anunnaki just like another religion, right? Is this like just the Sumerians' depiction of whatever religion that we're seeing the same kind of themes in all the religions? I mean, were they real? Were they not? They are expected to come back into orbit in like 2900, so 2900. So we won't live to see that. But some of the questions, like when they come back, or if they come back, I guess, is will they be pleased with how far we've come? Like all the technological advances that we've created? Will they be upset because we've veered so far off the course of what they created us for? I mean, we are still mining gold. That's still, and is that why we think gold is so precious? Like we hold it to such a high standard because we're created in the Anunnaki's image? Or will we have destroyed ourselves by then? Like, will we even be around when the Anunnaki come back? That's another really good question, because at the rate we're going, a lot of people don't think we'll be around in 100 years, let alone, 900 years, right? So, I don't know. There's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot of information about the Anunnaki. Could they have been what is depicted as gods and we just created it in a different story to make it work for us better? I don't know. I don't really have the answers for you. This is up to you to decide, really. But of course, my friends, thank you as always for listening. I really appreciate you. Welcome. I have so many new listeners, so welcome, guys. I really appreciate all of you guys listening and supporting my podcast. I do everything by myself. So I do the editing, I do the recording, I do the research, I do all of it. So I really appreciate the support. You guys mean so much to me. Thank you. You can always message me on Instagram. I get a lot of messages from you guys on Instagram. I really appreciate it. I try to interact with each of you as much as possible. So if you want to reach out, I will. I run the Instagram, so I will message you back. But until next week, my friends, stay skeptical, and I will see you all very soon. Hey friends, The Rabbit Hole is an independent podcast with everything you hear done by me, Danny Mercy. I appreciate all of your support. Please rate and review wherever you're listening. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at rabbit.holepodcast. And thank you, Zakar Balaha, for our awesome intro.